Good morning. Welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Mrs. Angella Nazarian, an acclaimed author and international speaker, a generous philanthropist, an entrepreneur, and a co-founder of Visionary Woman, a nonprofit women's leadership organization in Los Angeles that brings together the most dynamic women thought leaders in the country.
Ms. Nazarian is also the co-founder of Looking Beyond, which is another nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of children with special needs. Ms. Nazarian, it's a privilege and we are truly honored to interview you today. My name is Sarish Jasti, and I'm a senior from Homedale High School from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots.
And my name is Raul Kaburu, and I'm a rising sophomore at St. Paul's School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots. So the first question that we always ask is, what are your CompanyRoots, and how did they help you in shaping your ideas to get into your current projects like Visionary Woman and Looking Beyond?
Well, I think the root of everything that I do is not only making an impact, but also building a community where we can amplify our voice. You know, they always say that if you want to go fast, you go alone, but if you want to go far, you take people with you.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the most important thing to see if I can translate that vision with a group of other like-minded people and see if we can pool our talents together.
Right. So it's actually kind of crazy that you said that quote, because I have this whole quote book, and one of the first one in there that I made in my freshman year was, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it was said by some guest speaker when I was visiting Microsoft, the headquarters in New York City. So that one has really resonated with me throughout my high school.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think there was a senator who was the culmination speaker at Penn.
Yeah.
When my son graduated, and he said the same thing, and I loved it so much. I've always kept it in my notebook.
Of course. So your childhood was filled with a lot of great obstacles, and it was a very tough time period, I can imagine. So what are some of the stories behind your childhood experiences, and what lessons have you taken away that have impacted the person that you are today?
Yeah, I want to speak to those people who are immigrants or refugees. You know, I was a refugee actually, and you know, looking at my present state and what I'm doing, it wouldn't be so apparent, but I came here at the age of 11 with one suitcase and never went back. So pretty much everything that I ever owned in my prior life in Iran and older brothers who were studying in the States.
Yeah.
And so my father just thought that maybe for winter break, we'll be going there to visit my brothers and we'll come back. But things got worse and worse. So what happened was my mom had to go back to Iran to join my father to see how they could shore up some, resources, sell some assets so they could support 5 kids in the United States.
Yeah.
And so from the age of 11 to 16 and a half, I was living with my older siblings. So I didn't have my parents around.
Yeah.
Wow.
What makes this especially challenging is that I think your teenage years are such big, formidable years in forming your identity.
Yeah.
You come to a place where, I signed up, even when my parents came back, they weren't very well versed in the educational system, the language, the ways of doing things. So, I applied to colleges myself. I mean, they had no part in doing that. Or what I wanted to do was always shoring up my own resources. And I think, what are the lessons learned? I think that a lot of us have a lot of resilience. So I think that when things come our way, there's a hidden pool of resources within us that we can tap into. And even if it's difficult, we learn a lot of interesting things from it. And I think that what I learned is that I could be independent, that I could find different ways of connecting to people and getting help or learning from other people, So, in some ways, as difficult as it was, it also liberated me as a human being
Yeah.
to go past my culture and connect with other people.
Hmm.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you have written 4 different novels that discuss the journeys of several visionaries across the globe, like yourself. And for our viewers who might not have read the books, can you briefly share why you chose to write about these topics?
Sure. So actually the books that I've written are nonfiction. My first book is actually the life story of how we as a family escaped Iran and made the transition here. That was called Life as a Visitor. But following that, on my prior life, I was a psychology professor. And so I wanted to really take the lens of human growth and human potential and put it on what makes people world leaders so successful. And if we had to account for socioeconomic background, ethnic background, and the discipline in which they were thriving in, what was the human characteristic in all of these women that made them as great as they were? I mean, they were all trailblazers. So my 2 books, Visionary Women and Pioneers of the Possible, really showcases each book 20 change makers in the world.
Right.
And we track their life story not through a biography, but really through a human lens of what motivated them. Were there any mentors? Were there any specific characteristics that they all shared that made them successful?
Yeah.
And then finally, this 4th book is called Creative Couples. And it really came about because, I have a nonprofit that's a women's leadership nonprofit. And I have 2 books that are about women's leadership. And I think the next step in any movement within the leadership movement for women has to take into account the voices of men and how men come to help women as well. So I showcased 15 couples that changed 20th century history and their dynamics.
Yeah. That's very inspiring.
So how are you able to get in contact with these 15 couples?
Oh, isn't that so crazy? Well, some of them are historical, so I couldn't get into contact with them. But the ones that are alive, it's a network of people knowing other people. They're in the arts, because I'm on a board of a museum, I would ask the director, "Look at how you contacted me. How did you do that?" I have to be asking you guys this question. I
You
mean,
you directly.
you're high schoolers, and then you reach out to people. You say, what's the downside of asking?
Yeah.
There's nothing, right?
Mhm.
So you just have to be fearless in asking. If you go with the idea that you ask a question, you see if they want to do it, and then you build your resume on that. The next ask is, "Oh, I interviewed so and so and so and so and so and so,"
Yeah.
and so they take you as a more credible source. So just imagine, by the time that I came to asking Ruth Bader Ginsburg in my last book, I had, reached out to the Supreme Court for other justices. So then I become a known entity, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Of course. So for everyone to be successful, we all know there's a woman behind it. So who is your inspiration or mentor for your success, and how do they impact you and develop your love for humanity?
So I don't think there has been one particular person in my life. I think that I came from a very traditional Middle Eastern culture, so there weren't so many women that
Yeah.
were working outside of the house. I can always say that my mom has been a great mentor because she's had a great moral compass.
Right.
So, and she's taught me the importance of hard work. She's a hard worker.
Mhm.
So I got that from my mom, but probably one of the reasons why I actually started writing those books on women's leadership was because I felt that I lacked specific mentors in my life while growing up. And that's a very important thing that I encourage every young person to be very mindful of going through life, figuring out who are the people that they want to emulate. And even if they sit with them for 1 hour, that's mentorship. Mentorship doesn't need to be 20 years of,
Yeah.
hand holding. And
Mhm.
so writing those books was a way of mentoring myself into a new identity,
Yeah.
knowing that I really believe, and I think everybody should, it's not only me in particular, but that everyone has the power to make impact.
Right.
And it's about you trying to see what's your biggest talent and molding your impact and your work around your talent.
Yeah. So next I'll be attending UPenn at Wharton for their social impact and responsibility program. It's one of the things that I was really looking forward to when I was applying. And so the question comes to, for a lot of high schoolers, if you have like this passion, then how do you explore it in the social impact field? Because it's only now starting to come up within the past like 10 to 20 years, I think.
Exactly. And I mean, I'm so proud that Wharton does want to develop the future leaders of companies and business people who have social impact on their mind. And that's something that my husband David and I really, really believe in. And both our kids, Philip and Eli, have had that as a priority. That
Yeah.
it's no longer about doing business, it's about who you are. And your identity should include a part of you keeping the environment healthy, business healthy, and your surroundings and your workplace healthy.
Yeah.
And I think one of the groundbreaking models was the Tom's model. But now there's so many different ways of doing business and giving back. A lot of companies have foundations, or they have certain policies towards training and promoting, or going into communities and helping them. And I think it really has to revolve around what is the company culture and what kind of values you want to espouse, not only to your company, but to the community at large.
Right. Yeah.
So, as an expert in the field, what are some of the underlying causes for the issues women face today that people generally don't notice? And how is Visionary Woman looking to solve those problems?
Thank you for that question. And that's a very important question to ask. And I think it's a very multifaceted kind of discussion. I think one of the things that needs to happen, for example, there's a lot of studies shown that women are less likely to apply to work, that is, ask for raises or go for a promotion. And part of it is the mindset that they feel that they need to know everything before they even apply for the job. You
Yeah.
compare that to their male counterparts, and men tend to have more confidence in taking things that are a little unknown, and they say, well, I've learned it on the job. I think is confidence building, not being afraid to ask. And I think as we populate our community with more community leaders, female community leaders, we naturally will do that. I think what Visionary Women wants to do, and I want to talk about it's a two-pronged nonprofit. One is that we bring thought leaders from all around the world, from Nobel laureates to leaders, policymakers, in all spheres of life, whether it's in the arts, in business, in social entrepreneurship. And we bring them to our community of women leaders here, but we also want to do outreach. So we bring students from high potential students from inner cities to come to those events, because I think it's very important to imagine yourself or to talk to someone and have access to people that will give you a different way of thinking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's very important. And then the other part is that our mission statement is that 100% of our membership goes back into funding women's initiatives. So we have a very, very strict guidelines for where we give money. But what we do is that we have served over 50 nonprofits, whether it's education in sub-Saharan Africa, whether it's to human trafficking. So we try to also help by giving money to nonprofits that their core mission is to help women and girls.
Yeah.
So that's how we're going about doing what we're doing. And, building a community. I think a lot of times what you see with women's leadership conferences, that it's once a year and then nobody sees each other and you feel all motivated. And after a month, all those ideas are out of your head.
Yeah.
So how do we build a community where you're touching base on a, monthly base? You have a network of like-minded people that are working towards the same mission.
Yeah. So with your nonprofit organizations, which work on benefiting society, obviously, what type of work are you directly involved with on a day-to-day basis?
I'm the CFO.
Yeah.
So financially, I'm keeping track of everything. I'm on the executive committee. So long-term planning, strategizing, since, this was a startup. I mean, we really did this as a startup, and now we've raised over $2 million without ever having a party, a gala, or a luncheon, which a lot of nonprofits do. But, I'm really privileged to be working with a lot of talented people and a lot of members, and trying to come up with new initiatives, ways of being more efficient within our own system, because as the company grows as well, your problems change. I mean, when you first start a nonprofit, you're thinking about cash flow, you're thinking about how do you bring in members. Now that we have a very robust membership and a very good kind of money coming in, it's about how do you direct the funds in the best possible way? How do you follow up? And how do you keep your members engaged? So we're, each 2 or 3 years, we're looking at a different set of challenges that are also opportunities for us to become more established and more efficient. So we're looking at efficiency. So that's my day-to-day, working with the board on that, and community engagement. And I am also chairing the topic curation. So for the most part, I, along with my committee, do the reach out to bring people for the events.
Yeah.
So where do you see Visionary Women and also Looking Beyond in 10 years?
So Looking Beyond has been going on for the past 21 years.
Wow.
And I think that one feels a very well-established nonprofit. I think what I want to see is that, I founded that along with a few of my dearest friends when I was 29 years old. And it was really a children's charity. And it came about because we were all young moms. And I always think that for the health of any organization, you have to have a good succession plan. So how do you give the baton to the next generation for them to lead? That becomes, I don't want to be the leader of any organization forever.
Right.
So how do you train new leaders, and how do you engage them? We're doing a really good job with Looking Beyond in that, because we now have the next generation group. We have younger leaders coming onto our board. With Visionary Women, I think, we've been asked to take this national, and we're taking our time. We're taking our time because we need to have a really, we call this a secret sauce. Like, what's the secret sauce to this organization that makes it so interesting that people want to join? And you don't want to lose that, whether it's called your branding or whatever it is. So you have to be so clear on what that is and see how you can scale it, and trust that other people in different parts of the country can do the same thing according to the brand that you're building.
Yeah.
So, in 5 to 10 years, I hope to see Visionary Women in other parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is one about character building and self-improvement. Obviously, I watched some of the clips from your conversations with Sadhguru, commonly known as the Mystic. And so one of the moments that struck a chord with me was when he said, what happens around you, many people can decide, but what happens within me must be my making, isn't it? And so In our society, which values individualism and hard work, what qualities have you noticed reach the farthest to bolster your own success?
Having empathy,
Empathy.
being a good listener. I
Mhm.
think being a good listener is one of the key things with any good leader, because you can have the vision, but if you're working with other people, they have to understand, they need to feel that there's a deep level of listening, that you are also as invested in their happiness and in their wanting to improve,
Yeah,
so that it feels that we're all on the journey together, that growth happens when we invest in each other's success.
right.
So, Visionary Woman seeks to advance the status of a woman by holding dynamic and thought provoking conversations with current leaders and innovators. And Company Roots, on obviously a much smaller scale, seeks to do the same thing but with entrepreneurship. So, how would you recommend we get in touch with other people with big ideas like yourself?
Well, that's very good. Well, you don't be afraid to ask. I think that's the number one thing. And I think that, many leaders understand the value of intergenerational dialogue. I think one of the reasons why I really wanted to be conversing with you two very talented young men is the fact that when you see um, high schoolers, I mean, this is incredible. The kinds of questions you're asking, what you're involved in, it's contagious. You want to help. You want to help. But there's a lot of value in in wanting to have intergenerational conversations, because your enthusiasm makes me more enthusiastic about my work, and this way it's symbiotic. You're also doing me something, a favor. It's not that I'm only doing you a favor. So um and also, whoever that you bring on, you can always ask them, say, if this was a good experience for you, who do you suggest?
Yeah,
That this is how you build your network.
of course. Yeah. What I feel is there's a little bit of a gap in how our education system works. So we learn, obviously in the US we learn very well about math, English, and science, history, right? And maybe in other parts of the world that type of stuff is a little bit lacking. But then the one thing that we don't get much of is being able to talk to some of the people who are shaping our world right now. Because in my mind, everybody should have the opportunity to be a leader and a visionary in their own way. And the best way to bring that to fruition is by just having these more personal conversations with people who have gone through the process and done it already. So
True. I agree. And I really believe in what you're doing. And I think another part is that the sooner and the younger you start doing that, the more clarity you'll have around what you'd like to do. Because in
yeah,
those conversations, it's like a tuning fork. Something within you resonates, and you say, I think this one is interesting. So you take that path. So
mhm,
I really believe what you're saying is very true. And also, it builds emotional intelligence.
yeah,
Reading books is one thing. My husband also talks about that a lot, that wherewithal to interact with other people, then there's a huge piece missing.
yeah,
So we have to nurture both things.
definitely. So one of my last questions for you today is going to be about your program in the Wharton Social Impact Initiative. So you helped start the Nazarian Social Innovators in Residence, and I'm looking to spend a lot of my time at UPenn exploring the Wharton Social Impact Initiative as well, and that program. So how did you come up with this idea and envision such a great program? And what would you say to future students who are looking to get involved with it?
Thank you for asking that. It really comes because of our own family values. On both sides, my family and my husband David's family, we have always felt that it's a responsibility and part of our DNA to be doing things that engages community and makes the environment better for everyone.
Yeah,
And both our boys, while they were in high school, one created a nonprofit, and the other was very, very engaged in volunteerism. And so that was something that we thought would resonate if our kids love that. And actually, Eli, who graduated Wharton, Eli Nazarian, that was part of his mission and in his application, that he wanted to explore those topics more. And I think if we can provide that to other smart students, how we can amplify our impact. It's exponential. So you go out there and you learn something and you pay it forward to another 20 people.
Yeah.
Or when you know, make your company, create your company, you could be affecting thousands of people. So the best way is to train the upcoming leaders.
Yeah.
In fine educational systems.
Yeah.
So we always end the interview off on the same question. So what advice would you give to the current generation of high schoolers that would like to make a positive impact on society, including solving a multitude of problems that makes people's lives better? And how would you recommend they start the process?
I think part of it is, I think there's a lot of value in interdisciplinary conversations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be very interesting for a businessman to be talking to an engineer, to someone who's studied philosophy. You know, a lot of what you'll see in a lot of big change makers is that what they studied in and what they thrived in are completely different things. So, you know, life takes you in different turns. You may have a philosophy background and then end up, you know, leading a company. It's really interesting how many people in the humanities have actually become business people.
Yeah.
So I think it's really interesting if within your schools, or, you know, I think that's very interesting to see if you can bring people from the arts, from engineering, from technical backgrounds, from business backgrounds, from humanities, and form a group where you can do things together. I always think about the X Prize. Like, if you've ever heard of the X Prize, what they do is that they put an initiative and they put a prize around it. But people from different countries actually form groups to solve a problem.
Yeah.
And I like that angle because, you know, if I were to solve a problem, I'd only look at it through my eyes.
Right.
But if you have other people trained in different fields coming together to see how they could help, I think that could be a very rich conversation.
Right. Definitely. That's a lot of food for thought.
Yeah. Maybe you want to start that up.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to thank you for having us interview you today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.